Here's the question. Does God exist? Well, how do you know that God exists? When it comes to validating the material world in which we live, we use our empirical senses. We use our eyes because we can see something. We use our hands, we can touch something. Our ears, we can hear it. We can smell it, and we can taste it. Our five senses help us validate whether or not something does exist. But when that comes to God, how do you do that? Oh, I know, here it is. God's just to your right. If you will just walk over there right now, you can see him, he's right there. So just walk over if you will. And if you start a conversation with him, I'm pretty certain he'll talk with you and you can hear him saying things to you. And in fact, if you get close enough, you might detect a certain smell. We can't do that with God. We cannot use our empirical senses because we cannot see, touch, smell, taste, or hear God in that sense. So how then do we know that God exists? The Bible says it is by faith that we understand the universe was created by God's Word, so that what can be seen, that is the natural world, was made out of what cannot be seen, the supernatural. But I come back to our question, does God exist? And how do I know that God exists? And here's the bottom line. For all of you that are viewing this video, I cannot make any of you believe that God exists. But what I can do is give you some proofs that point to the existence of God. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at 5 basic proofs that you can use for your own understanding and help you answer, if you will, that question, does God exist? So let's begin. Here's proof number 1. The universe must have a cause. Within the world, the natural world in which we live, a fundamental law of science is the law of cause and effect. Simply stating that when you see an effect, you know there must be a cause. For every material effect that we see, there was a cause that came before it. Well, when you look at the material world in which we live, and it's obvious because it's all around you and you can see it, you can experience it, you know that it exists, there's an effect. But what caused the universe? How did this universe come into being? If you do not believe in a creator, then you must believe that something came into existence from nothing. Let me say that again. You've got to believe that something came into existence from nothing if there is no God. If you believe that nothing produced something, then you must believe that the natural world came from a supernatural nothing. And that, my friend, makes no sense whatsoever. Because we know that this natural world does indeed exist. We can see it, we can touch it, we can smell it, we can hear it, we can use our empirical senses and know that it's there. And the only answer to its existence is a God who brought it into existence. A supernatural being that brought into existence the natural world in which we find ourselves. Proof 1, the universe must have a cause, and we know that that cause is God. Here's proof 2, proof number 2. Design reveals a designer. It is an understood truism that the universe looks designed. I mean, if you look at the screen you're viewing right now, whether it's a smartphone that you're holding in your hand or a monitor that's in front of you, you know intuitively that that smartphone or that screen is designed. You know that it did not come into existence on its own. It bears all the marks of design because it's complex and it functions. Well, when you look at our natural world, you can see the same thing. Whether you're looking at the macro world and looking at the universe at large, or whether you're peering down into the micro world of cells and so forth, You see design everywhere. You see complexity. When you look at the macro world, just the solar system in which our Earth is found, there are so many anthropic constants. That is, those factors that have to be or life simply would not exist on this planet we call Earth. Everything is exactly as it should be. That, my friend, cannot happen by chance. That is pointing to a designer. But even if I look into the micro world, take the cell for instance. When you look at any cell, whether it be a cell in your body, an animal, or any living organism, you see something that is utterly complex, that is more involved, more going on than even the greatest of the industrial factories that we know today. It is amazing when you look at that cell. And even as I speak, millions of your cells in your body have already been replaced. Does that happen by chance? Or is it revealing a designer? But if there is no designer, if there is no God, then we are supposed to believe that a supernatural nothing designed the highly complex macro world and micro world that exist in the world in which we find ourselves. The design of the universe, whether you're talking macro or micro, it reveals a supernatural, intelligent designer, because design reveals a designer. Let's look at proof number 3. Living organisms require life givers. Living organisms require a life giver. In our natural world, we understand something called the law of biogenesis, which simply states that the material natural world of life, that those things that are living, they come from previously existing life of its own kind. So life begets life. But I ask the question again, how did life even come to be in the first place? Well, you know, it wasn't that long ago where people actually believed that life could arise spontaneously from non-living chemicals. But this obviously has been proven false today. But if you believe that natural life can arise from a non-living chemical, you are once again having to believe that life arises from a supernatural nothing. And when you're looking at life at large, even if you don't believe that life could arise from non-living chemicals, you're still having to explain, where does this life come from? Where does it come from? And even the non-living chemicals, if you're holding on to that, where did they come from? And once again, we are now back to a supernatural nothing creating a material something. And not only a material something, but a material something that is alive. The only answer that you have for that is a creator, God. For living organisms require a life giver. Well, here's proof number 4. Objective morality demands an objective lawgiver. Now, when I say objective, I mean independent of people's opinions. There is a standard for right and wrong that is simply absolute. It is unchanging. It is universally accepted. For instance, we know that the torture of babies or the rape and the murder of little girls are both universally understood to be morally wrong. But why? Why do we believe that? Why do we, as a people around the globe, believe that the torture of a baby or the rape and the murder of a little girl is wrong? If you say that it's based on society's moral understanding, you're going to be in real trouble, because society is forever changing. They blow with the wind in their beliefs and how they view and how they understand things. So, if in fact your source of absolute objective morality does not have God in the picture, you're really in a real pickle, because you're backed again to the supernatural nothing that somehow is defining objective morality. Or you're simply left with the subjective opinions of society that you and I both know can change and change very quickly. Yet we know, and universally it is known, that there are some things that are categorically morally wrong, like the torture of a child or the rape and the murder of a little girl. We know that. People of all cultures understand and know that. And for that to be true, there needs to be a standard that rises above each individual's opinion and rises above society's opinions. It is an unchanging, absolute standard. Who could that be? My friend, that is God. Because God alone is the absolute, unchanging standard for that which is right or wrong, that which is good. He is the standard of rightness that we know as the moral law because it flows from the unchanging character of God. Well, here's our final proof. Reasoning minds call for a rational creator. Here's a question I pose to you. Can mindless evolution produce a being with a mind? Think about that for a moment. Let me just state that again. Can a mindless evolutionary process bring into being a being with a mind that thinks, a mind that uses logic, a mind that reasons? How can a mindless, illogical process that is based on random and chance bring into being that which can think clearly, can use logic, can reason? How do you explain that? Well, if you say there is no God, if you believe there is no God, then once again, you are left with a mindless, supernatural nothing that somehow has created living beings with a mind. And now we're in a real problem, because how then do you explain our ability to reason and use logic? If we are in fact the product of that mindless evolutionary process, then the ability to think and to use the laws of logic is simply an illusion. Really, all you have, if you're believing in this robotic, if you will, evolutionary process, is that it produces robotic living beings, whatever that might be and however you understand that. But they certainly cannot reason or logic. They just simply function. They just are. But we don't do that as human beings. We think. Even now, as I'm talking to you, you are processing what I am saying. You are thinking it through logically. You're asking questions within your mind. You're rationalizing all of what's being said and pondering some of the things and the proofs that I'm giving to you. How then do you explain that if there is not a God who is a rational creator who made you as a rational being in His image? Again, you're left with a supernatural nothing that somehow has brought into being rational, logical beings. Here's the bottom line. A supernatural nothing cannot create a universe with complex design that is filled with living organisms that intuitively know right from wrong and can think and reason. When you process that, you take a step back and begin to realize, how do I explain the material world in which I live apart from a God who created it? And that's why when you come back to chapter 11 of Hebrews where we started, I read to you verse 3. Let me move to verse 6, and here's what the writer says. Without faith, it is impossible to please Him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that He exists. So it brings us right back to where we began. Does God exist? And if He does, how do you know? And I'll come back to what I said at the very beginning. I cannot make any of you believe in the existence of God. But what I can do is give you some fundamental proofs that the universe must have a cause. Design reveals a designer. Living organisms require a life giver. Objective morality demands an objective lawgiver, and reasoning minds call for a rational creator. My friends, I know that God exists, and I have a relationship with the God who made me, who created me in His image through God the Son, Jesus Christ. And I hope the same for you. Hey, listen, thanks for being a part today. So glad you're joining with me. And if this information has been helpful, please hit the like button. And if you've not become a subscriber, just smash that subscriber button. I would love for you to come on board with so many that are joining and becoming a part of the journey that we're on. And again, thanks for being a part, and God's very best to you.